good evening. Thank you for your company. Breaking news tonight. The BBC was caught with its pants down over the Donald Trump video, and after getting spanked by the president last night, they'll officially apologise to him in a letter on Monday. Yep, whoopsie, mea culpa, my bad. I guess the only problem is that some of the BBC's biggest stars still, tonight, sound like they think they did nothing wrong. This is Holier Than Thou Today programme host Nick Robinson on Radio 4 this morning.
Monday's going to be a big day for the BBC because the man who wrote the memo that the Telegraph has been publishing is giving evidence to a Common Select Committee, and the BBC will give its own reaction to the claims that have been made. As ever with these sorts of stories, it's clear that there is a genuine concern about editorial standards and mistakes. There is also a political campaign by people who want to destroy the organisation that you are currently listening to. Both things are happening at the same time.
Oh yeah, boo-hoo. Well look, let's be honest for once, shall we, Nick? The BBC is destroying itself. It's not right-wingers sitting at the Panorama editing desk and creating fake news videos. They did that. But Robinson wasn't the only one today. The BBC World Affairs editor John Simpson also waded in. He wrote on X, "Nick Robinson is exactly right. There's a genuine concern about editorial standards and mistakes. There is also a political campaign by people who want to destroy the organisation that you are currently listening to. Both things are happening at the same time." Now look, I'm sorry, John, I'm sorry, Nick. Splicing together two things a man said nearly an hour apart from each other to make it look like he said the opposite of what he did isn't an editorial mistake. The White House was right. It's propaganda. And the lack of remorse is telling. The other question that begs tonight is why the BBC didn't raise the Trump video as a serious problem when it was first raised as an issue way back in May among B bosses. So Danny Cohen, the former director of BBC Television, he told The Telegraph tonight, both BBC Director General Tim Davie and Chairman Samir Shah were in the room when the fake Trump video was raised as a serious problem 6 months ago. This makes it very hard for them to excuse away the scandal. So, who's going to fall then on their sword tonight? Will it be maybe Tim Davie? Will it be Samir Shah? Has anyone been sacked yet? And where was BBC Verify amongst all this? The so-called fact-checking unit which spaffs £3.5 million of licence fee money up the wall each and every year, paying more than 60 staff members to make sure news stories are accurate. That whole damn unit, by the way, should be shut down immediately. But back to the wider story here. Why the hell should Brits be threatened with jail if they don't cough up £174 a year to an organisation which I now see as clearly unfit for purpose? The Trump deception video is the latest in a series of serious blunders from the BBC spanning absolute decades. And just this scandal alone, just the Trump video, would have probably seen the likes of GB News shut down. Could you imagine ministers frothing at the mouth to get on the airwaves and call for our demise? The BBC, meanwhile, gets away with it time and time again. Jimmy Savile, Martin Bashir's lies scamming Princess Diana, Hugh Edwards, whose licence fee payers are still funding his 300 grand a year pension, by the way, despite being a filthy paedophile. BBC News' lies that Israel bombed a hospital in Gaza when it was in fact a dodgy Hamas rocket. The obscene coverage of the police raid on Cliff Richard's home. Do you remember that? Bob Villan, this year, being allowed to spew filth at Glastonbury. The reporting of Nigel Farage's bank account. Their Gaza documentary featuring the family member of a Hamas minister. And of course, this week, presenter Martin Croxall getting whacked for daring to believe in basic biology. And of course, the latest Trump scandal. It was only in August, it was reported an 89-year-old widower received 53 threatening letters from BBC heavies for non-payment of their licence fee. And do you remember the greedy Beeb used to give free licence fees away, didn't they, to over 75s? But they pulled that back in 2020. Maybe so they could fund their inane and inept Verify team, who knows? But imagine threatening pensioners who refuse to fund your propaganda. The BBC will apologise to President Trump, whereabouts, on Monday, but it's time they apologise to the great British public too, because what was once an internationally respected institution has now morphed into a joke of an operation that behaves like an organised mafia when people refuse to cough up and fund their nonsense. It's time the BBC was put out to pasture, and President Trump should do what he did with ABC News and CBS here in America: sue the pants off the BBC.
Big Tech has turned your phone into a surveillance device, harvesting your data, tracking your location, and selling your information to corporations. Unplugged built the Upphone to fight back. It's the only smartphone with hardware-level privacy protection, completely blocking data harvesting at the source. It features a physical kill switch that cuts power instantly when you want to go dark, giving you control big tech took away. Unplugged puts privacy and sovereignty first. The Upphone is built to British standards, designed to keep your data in your hands with independent servers, its own app center, and no corporate gatekeepers. You can access what you choose. No censorship, no app bans, just freedom. Everyone else is playing by big tech's rules. Unplugged rewrote them. The Upphone runs on an operating system with 0 backdoors and a firewall that blocks thousands of tracking attempts every single day. The Upphone includes a host of unique security features. The device can be set to have its memory wiped regularly, and if someone demands your PIN code, well, you can give them a false PIN that will wipe the device. It's called emergency reset. Privacy isn't a feature with Unplugged, it is the foundation. To get yours today, click the link in the description now.
Now, down the line to discuss this is former BBC Current Affairs producer John Mayer. John, good evening. Thank you for your company. One big question.
I think you left out the kitchen sink there. You threw everything in. You threw everything in that little diatribe. Where's the kitchen sink? Look, the BBC has crisis managed this terribly. They always do. And this is the worst of the lot. But it's a bit rich that, Boris Johnson and Donald Trump are accusing the BBC of lying. Are those two truth tellers? Ask yourself that question. And now, what the BBC needs to do is publish any internal inquiries and publish them now. Don't hide them. They've had an internal inquiry about Prescott's complaint. Let's see what it said. And should Davey resign? No. But as editor-in-chief, he and the news CEO should appear at Select Committee next week or a news conference, explain and blame. They hide in, the two of them hide, and they have the armadillo defence. They put something around them. It no longer works. Transparency. So more than assistant head should roll on this, because that was an unfair piece of editing. Let's be honest, a totally unfair piece of editing, and they should have come out and said we were wrong on that, and they're eventually saying that. So, which is too little, too late. Now, in terms of the Arabic service, yeah, go on. The Arabic service.
Yeah, John, I was just going to say some of the BBC's biggest stars, Nick Robinson, John Simpson, they think this is some right-wing plot to bring down the corporation. What's your take on that?
There's an element of truth in that. The Telegraph, the Express, and the Mail, day after day. I mean, you can't read. I have a subscription to Telegraph. You can't read the Telegraph any day without at least 2 BBC stories. One of them true, one of them not true. What are they going to replace it with? Why do they hate the BBC? Why does GB News hate the BBC? They keep you honest then.
Well, I'll tell you what. Look, I don't hate the BBC. I wish people who work at the BBC well. I don't want people to lose their jobs. But when people are being forced to pay £174 a year, regardless of whether you watch the BBC or not, and you bear in mind the BBC's track record, scandal after scandal, the claims of bias, the incorrect reporting, the wrong information, it's different to say GB News or any private streaming service, because you've got a choice whether you pay for that. When you get the heavies sent round to a widower's door saying pay this licence fee or you're going to jail, while at the same time producing content and having editorial standards which are frankly in the gutter, that is inexcusable. So again, I say I don't hate the BBC, I just don't want British people threatened by men in dark suits in Portland House in central London sending bailiffs round forcing people to pay for their junk.
How would you finance public service broadcast if you didn't have a licence fee? Ask yourself that question. Can't be advertising.
Well, if they're so confident in their products, they should offer it as like a streaming service like Netflix. Put your money where your mouth is. Make sure your content and your standards are up there, and go into the marketplace. It's a free market. We live in a capitalist society. Don't suck off the teat of the state. Not just the state, pensioners.
Maybe they should have a hybrid licence fee where, there's a small licence fee and the other side of the iPlayer, you actually subscribe, because the BBC makes a bloody good programme. Look at the traitors, celebrity traitors. 11.1 million, 11.2 million people, day after day after day. And Strictly Come Dancing. But it makes mistakes. It has thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of broadcasting. It will get it wrong. Of course it will. But when it gets it wrong, it has to say, we got it wrong. And, don't be
John,
afraid
listen,
to
really appreciate your company. Who? The BBC or me?
I know. Somebody needs to look at the Royal Service in general. Should it be there? Should the licence payer pay it for it? There are all sorts of questions this raises. But stop beating up the BBC. Appreciate it.
Well, if they stop employing paedophiles and putting out fake news, I might have a bit more respect for them. Thank you, John. Appreciate your company. Have a good evening. Thank you very much for your contributions. Right, joining me in Washington, D.C. is my panel, political analyst Eric Cam and political commentator Hilary Fordwich. Good evening, panel. Welcome along.
Good evening.
Ladies first, Hilary.
Yes.
Your take on this BBC nonsense. There was the Telegraph journalist, Rob Crilly, who broke this story yesterday. He was in the studio on the Late Show Live. He said that he doesn't normally see BBC Washington correspondent Gary O'Donoghue in and around the White House very often, but he was in the White House yesterday. I just wonder, has he been dragged in for a dressing down in the Oval Office, which preempted this apology now coming on Monday?
Well, I don't know, and I won't speak to things I don't know. What I do know is we have the same thing over here. I mean, we've had networks, and that's why Trump also sued, where they edited what Kamala Harris said, and they tried to sort of clean up her word salad. So I think it's both sides of the Atlantic. I think the biggest issue here is the British taxpayer is paying for propaganda, left-wing propaganda. Just like in the US, when we fund NPR, you're funding left-wing propaganda. So I do think what's really important is that if the government is going to fund anything, it's got to be balanced. And I think that's the important issue, both sides of the Atlantic, exactly the same issue.
Eric, do you think President Trump should sue the BBC? Do you think he would sue the BBC? Do you think it's in his interest to?
No, I don't think suing the BBC is the same as suing ABC or CBS. I think clearly what took place there, that was more like an extortion plan that played out. He was basically just shaking down those entities, recognizing that Donald Trump, given his lawlessness, would certainly threaten their FCC licenses. And I don't think he would be willing to go that far with the BBC. We know he's already suing the Wall Street Journal, which is a Fox property. But I think the central issue of, in fact, what the BBC did, I do believe that's something that needs to be looked at. However, I don't think it in any way changes the tone, the tenor, and exactly what happened on that fateful day.
How do Americans view the BBC generally? Is it still the sort of internationally well-respected outfit that we used to know?
Oh, absolutely, it is.
Well, it depends who you ask. Right. I mean, I would say to you it's the Brit-bashing corporation.
Yes, that has been said before.
Yes.
The British Bashing Corporation. I think it was a term coined by a previous.
I'll tell you when I knew. I obviously grew up and I thought the BBC was the bastion of all brilliant news, right?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I was in England right before the 2016 election, and there was the Republican convention. The BBC was there. Thousands of people waving Trump, signs. The BBC interviewed 3 people, and all these 3 people were anti-Trump. And I thought, gosh, this is wonderful. The BBC is so balanced. Because I was expecting, now they're going to interview 3 people that are pro-Trump. They never did. And that's when I said, gosh, it's turned. And that's when I knew. All
right, well, let's see how GB News fares, because I went out onto the streets of DC today to get thoughts on the BBC. So do you reckon we got all anti-BBCers, or do we think we got some balance?
I think your average American thinks the BBC is still the bastion of brilliant news.
OK, let's take a look. Roll the VT. BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation.
No way, you don't want to speak to a British person in America.
The BBC was a school for media. Not anymore.
I mean, I think it's like the CNN.
Yeah.
They have an agenda.
Yeah.
But I trust them more than CNN.
That doesn't surprise me.
You're not a fan of the Beeb?
No, I think the Beeb's fine. I think they're very neutral. I think the people saying that might have a slightly biased view.
Sir, hello. You look very sharp.
I know.
I just wondered what you thought of the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation.
I'm not really a fan of TV.
You're not a fan?
Yeah.
And nowadays, the BBC does not resemble the great BBC.
Hello, who's a fan of the BBC here? No? You like the BBC?
And I think one of the things that the BBC relies on is the fact that they are seen as a truth teller. And as soon as you start doing that, you're removing that level of trust. And now where are you going for news?
Sir, hello. Do you like the BBC?
No, sorry.
No. The White House last night called them a fake news propaganda outlet.
Oh, that ain't right. That's not right. We don't stand for that. Everybody deserves the equal amount of respect.
At the BBC, they got a clip of President Trump and they spliced it to make him say something that he didn't say.
Yeah. Nah, that's not right. That's clip farming, right?
Down with the BBC.
Nah. Yeah.
But I just think the BBC have to be a little bit careful with what they're doing